achieve Pakistan's objectives. We don't have a trading relationship with our relationship to the East, and many will argue absolutely we should not. The environment is not as such, and given these outrageous assaults on our principled positions, it would be inappropriate for Pakistan to take such a step. But others would argue that this is just a continuation of that very same thought where we cut our nose to spite our face. And Ambassador, when you were speaking here and you were explaining about the trajectory of great power conflicts in our region between US and China, you also mentioned that their economic engagement was one of the reasons that you didn't necessarily see it getting as bad as everybody predicts. And one wonders, if not now, but say when Shaheed Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto had engaged with her counterpart when she was first elected Prime Minister, or back various people in the various attempts that engagement had been made. And if at that point in time we had achieved economic engagement with India, and our economic engagement on both sides had been to such a level that perhaps we would be in a position to more effectively influence Indian policy making. That if India's economic integration with Pakistan and Pakistan's economic integration with India was at such a point, perhaps neither state would be in a position to take such extreme positions. But unfortunately, if we followed the cut your nose to spite your face, and we don't even have that economic engagement, then perhaps we're in a position where we're less able to impact and to affect Indian policy making. And if I'm not talking, whatever I think about the government in India, whatever I think about their policies, and we have very strong feelings on that. If I'm talking at them through the media, through press conferences and press releases and statements, and not talking with them, then am I able to actually effectively impact any sort of change in their policies? Forget about the government. If it's our principal decision that I will not, which I don't think has ever happened in the history of the course of time and man, that a state, even in times of war, that communication between officials were not, but let's pretend that there was, so that's a legitimate option that we go forward. Surely talking to the people, engaging with the public, serves the interests of Pakistan. That despite the hyper-nationalist nature of the Indian media, are we going to cede that space to them and them alone? Or do we not believe that no matter what policy or whatever position the government of India may be taking, surely we don't blame the people of India, who we share thousands of years of history with, for every single decision of their government? And surely if we were not, okay, so if we were engaged with government as state functionaries, that has its own benefit. But if we were engaged with the Indian media, with the Indian public, surely we would be better placed to advocate Pakistan's cause, Pakistan's position, to expose the abuses of their government directly to their people. I believe that these are serious topics that think tanks such as yourselves have been thinking about, but it's time for us to seriously get thinking about it. Because we, as Pakistanis, have to understand where we stand at this point in time. We are at a crossroads. It's an extremely difficult crossroads of human history. We faced a once in a 100-year pandemic that, as the ambassador said, is yet to be over. Millions have died, people are still dying, and global health is still at risk. The threat of climate change is real and something that we as Pakistanis at least can no longer deny. If Jacobabad is experiencing 51 degrees heat in spring, if we are in what seems like a perpetual drought facing water scarcity levels of 60%, if our crop year after year suffers drastic damage, if there are fires raging from Balochistan to Khyber Pakhtunkhwa for 10 days on end, surely one of the greatest existential threats to man, climate change, will have an outside impact on a developing country, on a poor country like Pakistan. And then, because geopolitical events have a direct impact on our citizens, so we had an economic difficulties as a result of supply chain issues and the shock of COVID. And now the war in Ukraine has a direct impact on the lives of average Pakistanis. We used to import a significant amount of our wheat, of our urea, from Ukraine. The international world is now facing sky-high fuel prices, and everyone is feeling the effects of inflation as a direct result of these geopolitical events. And this is a time where everyone is pivoting to economic diplomacy and focusing on engagement everywhere and anywhere they can. And it is unfortunate that human history will record, but it will record this. When we were facing the existential threat of a pandemic and of climate change, the world decided to go to war, but that's what they decided to do. In Europe, there's a war, the tensions and conflicts threatening to spill out all over the place. Our own neighborhood, Afghanistan, I'm going to read your book, but, well, is extremely at a difficult crossroads in their own history. Because of geopolitical events, we've never reached the true potential of our economic potential with our neighbors in Iran. And now we have to race against time. The unity government is inherited in Pakistan, where wherever you look, there's a crisis. Internationally isolated, internationally disengaged for one reason or another. Economically, you've inherited an IMF deal that is stale, that is out of date, that is pre-COVID, that is of the fall of Kabul, that is pre the Ukrainian and Russian crisis, that is pre the global economic recession. But that is what you've got. Then you've inherited such economic decisions that can only be described as a suicide attack on our economy, that not only make things difficult for Pakistan, but obviously make things incredibly difficult for the average Pakistani. You've inherited institutions that have faced challenges throughout our course of our history, but in our view for the last 3 to 4 years, have been playing rather than a constitutional role, a more controversial role, while we're hoping for a transition back towards constitutional role that poses its own challenges. And whether it is on the economy, whether it is our domestic challenges, and whether it is our foreign policy, everybody has come together in this unity government to address these issues together. I am manning our foreign policy and our international challenges. Others are manning their own forts. And we're working together under incredibly difficult circumstances, not only for us and for the world. And it's time for all of us to start thinking of new ways for Pakistan to conduct itself, internally and externally, with the sole objective of not benefiting me or not benefiting any one individual, but benefiting the people of Pakistan over any perceived notion of hyper-nationalism or hyper-patriotism. The most patriotic thing we can do, as I can do, as a foreign minister of Pakistan, is to conduct a humble foreign policy based on the reality of challenges that face my country, to be firm in our positions, to be firm in communicating the interests of my people, but to never be arrogant, because we cannot afford it, our country cannot afford it. So I'm once again extremely grateful for this opportunity to address you today, and I look forward for my ministry working closely with your institute for us to think of ways to together address the challenges that we are facing. Thank you so much.
वज़ीर ख़ारिजा बिलावल भुट्टो ज़रदारी ISSI की तकरीब से खिताब कर रहे थे। उन्होंने कहा कि हमारे लोगों में इतनी सलाहियत